Hey guys, it's Marco again. It's that time of the year, since raids are coming out once a year. I will lay down my prediction for the upcoming patch on which is the best mage spec. And the best thing that you can do is to rain down Blizzard on the like button and then press tab to target the subscribe button for the ultimate combo. Short disclaimer is that this is all a prediction. If you don't agree with me on certain bosses, please write in the comments your opinions and why. First off, I want to do this right, so I will have to section this prediction in multiple ones. We will have 3 weeks of Heroic and 2 weeks of Mythic before we get our double legendary. I would assume that every semi-hardcore mage will get his hands on the tier set at that point. That's why I have 3 prediction sections. First one is for mages without set bonus, so that's gonna be like first week or 2. Second one is for mages with 2 or 4 piece, and lastly double legendary plus set bonus. My reasoning behind this is that the most important progression happens in the early weeks of the patch, so it's not fair to instantly look at week 5 meta. One more important detail are the set bonuses and double legendary power damage scaling, about which I already made a video, and the link to that video should be clickable in the top right corner. I didn't want to divide the raid in 4 predictions for each of the set bonuses, since it would get too convoluted. So when I'm talking about set bonuses, you only need 2 piece for Frost to work, but 4 piece for Arcane and Fire. Also, one more big thing is the fact that this tier is different than all the other raids in Shadowlands. We're no longer bound to a single covenant, so there won't be any need at saying which is the best spec overall. That's why I will focus on the bosses individually. Since I informed you about groundwork of the video, let the prediction begin. First boss is gonna be Vigilant Guardian. The boss should practically roll over in more ways than one. On normal and heroic, first phase is pretty much just adds killing. Second phase, the boss rolls in and starts at 50% HP as a solo target, and third, last phase is pure solo target execute phase. For Mythic, the boss immediately rolls into the fight and starts from 100% HP. That means that you will always be able to DPS at least one target. Because of the number of adds and nerf to Frost Mage's AoE, on Heroic I firmly believe that Arcane is going to be the best here for the first phase. Fire should also do fine as well, and Frost should be the worst, but not too bad. Biggest issue for Frost will be the downtime, which is going to be experienced if your guild has good damage. For the last phase, you kinda want good solo target damage and even burst damage for the execute with Time Warp. Fire definitely wins out at that department, but Arcane ain't too shabby either. Frost is famous for lacking burst, so they won't be able to achieve Fire and Arcane numbers. Situation changes for Mythic, and I believe that Arcane is still going to be the best, but Frost might be better than Fire due to constant cleave and priority target DPS. Set bonus doesn't change things too much for normal and heroic. Maybe Arcane will suffer a bit because of the longer touch of the Magi duration, since its explosion might not be ideal and it's probably not gonna hit all the adds that you wanted. For Mythic, I think that Frost and Arcane will be great. I give slight advantage to Arcane still. Frost will probably take the lead with double legendary, where they will just pump everything into the boss. Skolek should be second boss of the raid, and he's a pure solo target boss with some movement to dodge stuff on the ground. And you'll have to move so everyone is stacked on one place to reset the boss. And because of that mechanic, there will be some minor downtime with borrowing. At the start of the tier, Fire Mages should be the best. Frost should have an advantage compared to Arcane because of the Command Storm change. Overall, all specs should do fine. With the set bonus, Frost Mages should take a lead, with Arcane closing gap to Fire Mages. Lastly, with the double legendary power, I think that Frost should be the best, while Arcane will be slightly above Fire. Artificer Xymox is an interesting fight. It requires quite a lot of movement, some of it may be denied with blinks and alter time, but last 30% of the HP is really going to be hectic. On Heroic and Normal, you will only get 5 to 6 adds during the intermission at 75% and 50% HP. The rest of the fight is pure solo target. There is almost no downtime in this fight. Arcane should be the best at destroying the intermission adds. Fire will also be good. Frost was best for me on PTR, but after the nerf they won't be that good. On Mythic you will also have to jump platforms, and on those platforms you will DPS down 5 targets. One of the targets will have greater HP, so priority damage is also cool. Again, Arcane spec will be the go-to there, since 5 targets is perfect for them. My only issue with Arcane is going to be the last execute phase, where Fire is just going to be miles better than any other spec. With the set bonus, Arcane will still remain the best overall, with Frost getting a really big boost in overall damage, especially in the intermission phases. Lastly, with the legendary power, I think that Arcane will still remain the best, with Frost probably above Fire Mages. Halondrus is the last boss of this wing. The boss has been completely changed since the testing. It seems like he's going to be just a pure solo target fight with the same intermission phase. Fire should be the best here by far at the start. Arcane is going to be better than Frost in the intermission, since they gain a lot of speed from Arcane Barrage, so I would actually rank Frost and Arcane at the same level. With the set bonus, the situation will still favor Fire Mages in my opinion. Frost Mages have the biggest boost from the set, but their set won't be as good in intermission phases. Your Comet Storm won't hit the boss completely. Legendary shouldn't change a lot. Fire will probably remain the best, but with a much lower lead. The Sausage boss is mainly a solo target boss. You will have an ad from a point to point, but damn, that ad is just gonna die too fast to even think about the cleave. Hardest part of the boss might be her shield, which needs to be broken as soon as possible, but it will all depend on the tuning. So burst damage will be more useful in this fight, but also I'm not too sure on the cooldown timing. In theory, Fire Mages should be the best at start of the patch, with Frost being better than Arcane. Frost and Arcane might have the same importance though, due to the shield thingy and Arcane having bigger burst. With the set bonus, Frost Mages should be the best if the burst damage isn't as detrimental. Fire should have a certain lead on Arcane. And lastly, with the additional double legendary powers, Arcane should be above Fire. Prototype Pantheon is a very fun boss. In the first phase you're fighting two bosses at the same time and you need to get them both to 50% HP. At one point you get some ads which are spread all over the room with the first bosses, and then second phase begins when they both hit 50% and you get two more bosses. You also have to get them to 50% HP. Last phase is the time warp phase, where you just get all four bosses together and you just need to delete them as soon as possible. For the start of the raid, Arcane should be the best here with Cleave and 4 target AoE burst. Frost Mages fell from the Cleave grace. They ain't too bad, but they should be above Fire because of 2 target Cleave. With set bonus, I think that Arcane still might be the best, mostly because of the last phase, with Frost Mages being really damn good. In my opinion, Fire will be the weakest link at this point. And man, with double legendary the craziness hits the fan. Arcane scales nicely from the legendary in these situations, but so does Frost. It will definitely be interesting to see who is going to take the lead in the last phase. But since I have to do the guess here, I'll still state that Arcane is going to be the best at this fight. Levium is another weird boss with pretty much one phase repeating over and over. There's some new additions to the boss which weren't tested. This is going to be a mainly solo target boss with quite a bit of long distance movement. There will be target swapping in, let's say, the intermission phase, with the raid having to swap the solo target ad. Then after killing that ad, you pretty much get ambushed by several small ads which die quite quickly, and with those ads you'll group one more a bit chunky ad together with them. Overall, I think that Fire should be the best here at start of the raid, since they will be the best in turning little ads to dust. Arcane might struggle here with the ads, since they pretty much die before your touch of the Magi explodes. And lastly, Frost should overall be fine in terms of DPS. With the set bonus, I definitely think that Arcane's set 4 seconds more on touch of the Magi won't be good for these ads. At this point, I will actually give lead to Frost Mages, then Fire Mages, and lastly Arcane Mages. But the difference between Frost and Fire shouldn't be high. Double Legendary should just increase the gap between Frost and Fire, and reduce the gap between Arcane and Fire. Now for the big bad boy Anduin, who was giga hard on PTR. You got solo target damage, you got AoE, you got cleave, you got priority target DPS and movement. It's a hard task trying to predict what is going to be the best here, especially since he has Gorfin-like mechanic built in as well. He had some changes which haven't been tested, but the fight should still roll out in the same way. First phase is solo target DPS and you may go to some kind of a Shadow Realm. And there you have a priority ad with some spread AoE, like smaller ads going to the center. And your job is pretty much to kill them. And every time you kill little ads, the Anduin's energy is going to fill. After you fill Anduin's energy to 100, intermission phase begins, or is it phase 2, I don't really remember. Then you fight Arthas, who summons a bunch of ads, and during that time Anduin is completely stunned, he really doesn't do anything. But the most important part of this phase is that if you do 100 damage to Arthas, Undoing will take 150 damage. So this is the biggest DPS phase. That's where huge priority DPS comes into hand. Padding wise, fire will do insane damage in this phase thanks to like a bunch of mobs flying around, but that's not optimal for killing the boss. Overall, I think that Frost Mages should do great for this fight, since they have good constant damage and their priority damage is huge. Arcane also packs a huge priority damage, but I think that they won't be as good in Shadow part of the fight. That's why I'll have to go out on a limb and say that Frost is the best on this fight, then Arcane, and lastly Fire. With set bonus, Frost is just going to become increasingly more huge. They'll have huge uptime on Frozen Orb and Rune of Power in the intermission phases. Arcane will have some insane bursts of damage on Lich King. When we get our hands on double legendary, this just increases Frost priority damage by a ton. That's why I think their lead is going to be bigger with double legendary, and Arcane will remain firmly on second place. And this is pretty much it for the tested bosses. For the last 3 bosses, I will have to go in super speculative mode, so bear with me. Lords of Dread should be a cleave fight, there won't be adds, but they will have 2 different intermission phases, and probably this boss is going to have the biggest downtime of them all. In the first intermission phase, both of the bosses become an untargetable swarm. I think that it's going to be untargetable. You will still be able to do AoE damage to them, and the damage from AoE is going to be doubled. And then after some time, the bosses return to the normal phase. Second intermission phase sounds interesting, and you'll have to find the Dreadlord somewhere in the room, maybe even inside of your friendly characters, and burst them down before the timer runs down. That's where the burst comes in handy. Honestly, for 2-target cleave part, Frost Mages should do the best, with Arcane Mages not being behind a lot, and Fire Mages should fare the worst there. I think that Frost Mages have the highest non-targetable AoE damage with Frozen Orb, Blizzard and Arcane Explosion. Fire will do fine with Flame Patch and Flame Strike spamming, and lastly Arcane will only be able to use Arcane Explosion and Arcane Orb. Second intermission phase is the phase which favors Arcane and Fire more than Frost, because there is going to be downtime and Burst is probably gonna be required. But even with a bit of downtime, I think that Frost should still be the best here, followed by Arcane and Fire. Set bonus doesn't do a lot here, it's just going to increase Frost Mage's lead, and then Arcane is going to have a bigger lead on Fire and so on. And lastly, double legendary is doing exactly the same thing as the set bonus, nothing is gonna change, the gap is just going to be a bit bigger. Rygolon looks to be mostly solo target fight with some target swapping to delete constellations. Some constellations might be cleavable, but the fight should be majorly on the solo target side, which means that Fire should be the best coming into the raid, with Frost in the second place and Arcane as third DPS. Also from the tooltips in the dungeon journal, it doesn't seem that the boss will have any downtime. That's why I would put my money on Frost to take the lead with the set bonus and even bigger lead with double legendary. Fire should be better than Arcane with set bonus, but Fire lead will become smaller. With double legendary, Arcane should be a bit better than Fire here. Lastly, we have the Jailer. He's going to have a lot of phases, but he still looks to be a heavy solo target boss. We might have some damage swapping to change, which will go out on the raid. And I can't even say if that's going to be AoE or just swap to them one by one. Also, this is the last boss of the raid, so I can't tell if there is going to be downtime with him talking, but I don't think that's going to be the case. At least, I don't see any abilities from the dungeon journal which say otherwise. So I would have to do the same guess on the Jailer as I did with Rygolon. If you're unlucky and don't have the setup at this point, you will run Fire. Frost should take the lead with the set bonus, Fire being second and Arcane third. But with the double legendary, it should be Frost, Arcane and then Fire. Well, this has been a long video. I hope that I didn't make you mad with my predictions. But hey, as I already said, do share your opinion down in the comment section. I can't wait to see the world first race and if my predictions were correct. Hopefully they will be correct and I will have 3 out of 3 correct predictions for this expansion. That's it for this video. If you want to be coached by me to improve your skills to annihilate the raid, check out my Patreon. Of course, you can just support me further if you don't need coaching. Thank you for watching, huge thanks to my current patrons for sticking with me during the content black hole, and until next time, take care.